Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Vegan Spirituality online gathering. My name is Lisa Levinson, and I'm one of your hosts of this gathering. I work for In Defense of Animals, and we are so excited to bring you these monthly events as a way to gather together and explore veganism as a spiritual practice. This program is part of our sustainable activism campaign to provide emotional and spiritual resources for activists and to build community among vegans. So it's really a thrill to be together, and we have people from all over the country who join us and all over the world, and it's really a great opportunity to connect and to share resources and also to learn from our fabulous speakers. And today we have a wonderful speaker, and first my co-host, Judy Carmen, who's the author of Peace to All Beings. She is going to take a moment and introduce you to our featured speaker today.
Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
Judy.
Judy here. Glad to have you all with us, and we're very, very excited to have Victoria Moran as our guest tonight. We're very lucky to have her. She's a very busy woman, and she's doing so many things. There's no way it would take the whole time to introduce her properly, but I've got a short bio to read to you. Victoria had a long transition from vegetarianism to vegan, but she's been in the vegan fold for the past 35 years. She is the best-selling author of 13 books, including Creating a Charmed Life, Main Street Vegan, and The Love-Powered Diet, a guide to overcoming food addiction based on 12-step recovery in a vegan lifestyle. Featured twice on Oprah and voted Peta's Sexiest Vegan Over 50 in 2016, Moran hosts the award-winning Main Street Vegan podcast and is founder and director of Main Street Vegan Academy, the exciting week-long intensive in New York City where you can be trained and certified in vegan lifestyle as a vegan lifestyle coach, educator, or entrepreneur, or maybe all three. Victoria is also lead producer of A Prayer for Compassion, Thomas Jackson's new documentary introducing vegan living to people of faith. It's a fantastic documentary. So thank you, Victoria, for joining us. We're so glad you're here. So tell us about your journey to veganism. How did you learn about it? And why did you decide to devote your life to helping people make their transition to this wonderful way of living?
Well, first, thank you and Lisa for having me on the program. And both of you actually are featured in A Prayer for Compassion. So it's wonderful that we're doing so many of these terrific things together. I think because we are a vegan spirituality group, I can say that, maybe I was vegetarian in a past life, because when I first heard the word when I was 5 years old, I came home from kindergarten with the 4 food groups, and the woman that lived with us to take care of me, because my parents worked in the days before daycare, was somebody who didn't like the government telling people what to do. And she said, there are some people who don't eat any meat and they're called vegetarians. And it just kind of went with me. And I thought, that's something I want to know more about. And I had no idea if I ever would. I was living in Kansas City, Missouri in the 1950s. Not exactly a hotbed of vegetarianism. But I think I carried that with me. I always cared about animals, and we adopted from the animal shelters, and we tried to save baby birds, and we usually didn't save them, but we did try. And at 18, I finally managed to make it to vegetarian. I had not heard the word vegan. When I did hear it, I thought, okay, this is right. But it just seemed impossible to me because, number one, it was just very, very different than the early 1970s. We didn't have soy and almond and oat milk at Starbucks. We didn't have Starbucks. It was just a very, very different era. But also I was a practicing binge eater, and I would sometimes try to be vegan. I'd be vegan for a month or so, and then that urge to binge would come over me, and I'd find myself in the 7-Eleven in the middle of the night reading labels, and they'd always have whey or something in there that wasn't vegan, and I would fall off the wagon and try to dig myself out and start over. But it was really, really difficult. So for me, it was spiritual recovery in a 12-step program that gave me the ability to make choices about what I would eat. And of course, I wanted it to be vegan. I'd wanted that forever. And at the time that this happened, my daughter was an infant, and I knew that I wanted to raise her the best way I knew how, which was vegan. But of course, I had to be vegan first. So that's what happened for me in 1983. It's been an amazing journey, and I don't think I had any idea that veganism would ever be where it is today. It's pretty spectacular.
It is amazing just how far we've come since then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there is, and you mentioned it, a spiritual theme that runs through your books and the writings that you do. So how does your spirituality blend with your veganism? That's what we talk about a lot.
Yeah, to me, they're absolutely one and the same. I mean, if God is love, which I happen to believe, then it's incumbent upon me to live in the most loving way possible. And I understand that there are impediments to that. For me, of course, the compulsive eating, the food addiction made it really, really difficult. And I couldn't live up to that highest light that I had, as Peace Pilgrim used to say. But I kept trying. And this is one thing I think about today whenever I talk with people who aren't vegan. I met a lovely woman a couple of days ago who said, well, I haven't had red meat since 1975, or a long time ago. She said, now, I still eat chicken because I'm Jewish. And I thought, I have heard I still eat chicken because I am fill in the blank. I mean, every religion, every ethnicity, every nationality, well, we have to eat chicken because we're that. And then she said, and I still eat fish just because I really like it. But then she paused and she said, but know that I admire what you do. So I think there's so many people out there like that. And so I try to be as open and loving towards them as I can, because I know that sometimes there are obstacles in people's lives that I don't understand. Of course, the animal rights activist in me wants to say, it's dead flesh and the mammary secretions of cows. What's the big deal? Just stop. But I know that I wasn't able to just stop. So I try to be with them through that. And for me, just studying the history of religions, my degree is in comparative religions. And in fact, I wrote my first book because I had a fellowship for foreign study. And this was the early 1980s. So I used the fellowship to study vegans in the UK, because there were more of them and it was a smaller landmass. It's just so hard to think back to a time when there were so few vegans in America that a university would give you lots of money to cross an ocean to study vegans in a smaller place, but that's what happened. And so when I wrote that first book, Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, it was really even then looking at veganism through a spiritual lens. And because I am kind of a religion nerd, I'm just fascinated by all the religions of the world and the scriptures and the teachings and what they have in common, that I've just seen that whether we're looking at the Bible and Genesis, or we're looking at the yogic teachings, we're looking at Buddhist teachings, certainly Jainism, these teachings have been around for a long time in a lot of places. And the idea that now, when being ecumenical is something that's possible just because the world has gotten smaller so that we do know people that are of other faith traditions than our own, we could come to that table and say, oh, and here's something else we have in common. There's this wonderful tradition of caring for animals, of caring for the body temple, of putting beautiful food into ourselves, because this is the body that is what we're going to become enlightened in, if indeed we are, or saved, or whatever way somebody wants to look at that. There's so much in these religious traditions. And then, of course, when you do it, you get so much spiritual capital, because all of a sudden there's this lightness, there's this wonderful lifting, kind of like the Franz Kafka quote when he looked supposedly in an aquarium and said, I can finally look at you in peace because I don't eat you anymore. There's just a lot to that.
Oh, thanks. That's so beautiful, so well said. And I think that's what we're all of us that are in the vegan spirituality movement are really feeling that. So thanks. So I also want to ask you, because you've reached thousands, maybe millions of people with your podcast and your Main Street Vegan Academy. So tell us more about those things, and also where do we look to find out when to listen to your podcasts and how to get to the Academy?
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been around the vegetarian and vegan world, as we've just been discussing, for a really long time. And even before 1983, when I finally made it to consistently vegan, I was already out speaking and writing. So I've been around this work for a very long time. But after I wrote my first 3 books that were vegan themed, I thought, what else can I say about animals and vegetables, especially then when so few people were caring about that. And so I did go out and write a lot of books about spirituality and contemporary finding oneself and that sort of thing. And it was after going to a Peta benefit in December of 2010 when they showed videos. And I had by then already been looking at those videos for, 40 years. But for some reason, my heart was extra open that night, and all I wanted to do was help animals. What I really wanted to do was write Peta a check for $100,000, but it would have bounced. So in the subway coming home, I really did hear the voice of God. I love being on this particular call that I can just say that without having to frame it in some way. I heard the voice of God, and it said, you don't have $100,000 to give to Peta. Here's what you can do. Your next book needs to be called Main Street Vegan. It needs to have 40 short chapters with a recipe at the end of each one, and it needs to be geared to the young woman that you were, whatever that was, when you finally managed to become vegan. And so, is someone talking to us? Okay, so
I think somebody needs to mute. Yeah, maybe a guest may have joined us and didn't mute themselves.
Okay, so that gave me the work for the rest of my life. Main Street Vegan was published in 2012. A month after that, Unity Online Radio, the radio ministry of the Unity churches, called me and said, would you like to have a radio show? You can call it Main Street Vegan. It's about time we got back to our roots. So probably a lot of people listening to this know that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of the Unity churches, were very vocal vegetarians as far back as the 1890s. They had a vegetarian restaurant, the Unity Inn, that at its height in the early 1900s was serving 1,900 meals a day, and they actually had a van that would go into downtown Kansas City. And interestingly enough, this was all happening in what was to become my hometown 50 years later. And so there was all this history, and there are some people now, some ministers and laity in Unity, who want to bring some of this back. So they invited me to do the show. We're now going into our 8th year. So Main Street Vegan is first a live radio show on Wednesday afternoons, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. U.S. East Coast time, and you can just figure your time in there. But of course, now 99.9% of our listeners listen to the podcast, which is up on Unity Online Radio, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher the next morning. So we have a brand new one that went up today with Dr. Ernie Ward, who's a wonderful veterinarian and developing some amazing dog treats and dog foods for Wild Earth from fungus. And then we also had a lovely young woman, Amanda Rolat, who has a startup called Tails Up, which is a fresh dog food company. The dog food will be delivered. So what I try to do with the podcast is cover everything of interest to vegans. So we talk about animal rights, we talk about spirituality, we talk about nutrition and health and fashion and entertainment and cuisine and travel and dating and raising families and just whatever it is, because the most exciting thing to me about being vegan, short of what we're doing for animals and for the planet, is you open that door marked vegan and behind it, you think you maybe will find some food or maybe you'll find a way to lower your cholesterol, but you open that door and there's just a wealth. And so we try to cover all of that on the Main Street Vegan Show. So I hope that everybody will want to listen. And then another part of the Main Street Vegan umbrella is the Main Street Vegan Academy. And this is just my baby. It just came to me. There was a funny little story I'll tell because a lot of people like this, but I had that message that the book was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan, and we sold the book to Tarcher Penguin, and the editor called me as soon as everything was signed, and she said, we're glad to have you. This is our first vegan book, but we hate Main Street. You're going to have to change that. And so I tried because I want to be a team player, and they'd bought it. They were going to call it whatever they wanted to call it, but I just couldn't come up with another title. So I had a vegan miracle, and that's a great term. I mean, there are some vegan terms that I really love. One is vegan leather. It's like we don't have to say pleather or anything silly anymore. We can just say vegan leather. But I love vegan miracles because those are happening too. And I believe that that's because this is finally the era. This is the time for the animals. So what happened to me? I'm trying to write this book and I don't know what I'm going to call it, and nothing sounds good, and the writing process a little bit sluggish. And so I'm walking up Broadway, and there is somebody so famous that you can recognize him from the back. And that was Michael Moore, the filmmaker. And he'd read one of my earlier books and liked it. And so we exchanged pleasantries. And then he started calling me to ask me questions about food. And one night we're talking, and I just mentioned my book is supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. The publisher hates it. He said, they're wrong. Let me call them. And believe me, I never in my life thought that I would be on a three-way call with an editor and an Academy Award winner and me, and the Academy Award winner would be advocating for my title. So once I got that title, that was when all these other ideas started to pop, and Main Street Vegan Academy was one of those. And the first time, I don't know how these 13 people found their way here, because I had been out of the vegan writing world. I'd been vegan, but I hadn't been working in this world. I didn't have much of a following left here, but somehow 13 people found the course and they came, and now we have 420 graduates from 26 countries, and people are out there. Certified as vegan lifestyle coaches and educators, but many of them also starting businesses and doing amazing things. There's something, in Christianity we hear when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. In Main Street Vegan Academy, we get 20 gathered in the name of love. People from all traditions and all parts of the world come together with this idea that what we need to do is create a more loving earth. And and things happen. It's just absolutely magical. And I hope somebody who's listening to this might want to check us out, mainstreetvegan.net. And maybe you want to come to New York City and get yourself certified.
Oh, Victoria, what a great story. And I just love the miracleness of that. And I love what you said about this being the time. This is the time.
This
I
is the
feel it
time.
too. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us
Yeah.
do, that it's really happening. And we're seeing a lot of really good responses to, for example, the movie Prayer for Compassion, which is my next question. It's an absolutely amazing film, and you are the producer of that. And it's just, tell us about it. And you've already had some premieres in several big cities, and tell us how the response has been.
Oh, it's been amazing. And it's another incredible story because one of the things that came to my mind on that magical day when Main Street Vegan became my brand was there needs to be Main Street Vegan Productions, producing documentaries, feature films, who knows what. But, I'm a writer. I mean, I'm sitting here in my 2-bedroom apartment, not a producer, but it was there. It was kind of built in the ethers. And so all that needed to happen was somebody to come along and fill in the pieces in the material world. And that happened one day, going on 4 years ago now. We had a book giveaway on the radio show, and a gentleman called to get the book. And when he gave his address to the engineer, he also left a message for me asking if I would call, which I did. And that was Thomas Jackson, the filmmaker. And I'd actually met Thomas Jackson a few years before when he had lived in New York City. He'd actually ushered at the Unity Church, and I'd spoken there one day, and we had talked, and he talked with my husband. And he said, I want to do a feature film to introduce veganism to people who identify as religious or spiritual. Would you be the producer? And that's almost like somebody saying, I'm having a problem with my head. Would you operate on my brain? It's like, no, I don't know how to do that. And, I'd never produced a film before, but I have learned a lot from a lot of people, and one of the people who has taught me things is my daughter. My daughter is an actor, and she says you're always supposed to say yes. And if you can't do it, then you can go to plan B. So that's what I did. I just said, okay, I needed to first make sure that it wasn't looking for a lot of money because that wasn't something that I had readily available. And he said, oh no, what I need from you are contacts. And I'm like, well, those I have. I've been vegan for all these years. I know a lot of people. So we just started. I mean, we literally jumped in. Thomas started a GoFundMe campaign, and not much happened with it, frankly, but he just started anyway. And he went to the AR conference in LA that year and started filming, and I connected him with Will Tuttle and some other people, and people connected him with people. And then some executive producers came along that made it possible for this little shoestring film to become something more than that. And what it has become is something so powerful that it just blows me away. It was such a simple concept, but there's something in this film that speaks to people. And the people that it seems to speak to the best are those holdout spiritual non-vegans. And I would assume that a whole lot of people listening to this know these people. We know them in our churches, in our yoga centers, and in our spiritual groups of whatever kind. These are people who know what they know, and they believe that gives them a pass. These are the people that say, well, I always pray for the soul of the animal when I eat meat, or I only eat humane meat, or, they have all of these excuses, and they tend to be very articulate and sometimes intimidating people with their excuses. And I think lots of times we just create a sort of détente. Their attitude is, okay, you're vegan, that's fine, don't talk to me about it. And we're kind of like, well, I can either lose you as a friend, or I'll just, do what I do, eat what I eat, believe what I believe, and not push. These are the kinds of people that I happen to know in my personal experience see this film, and a very high percentage of them change. They change overnight, and they really start taking classes and going online and reading books and learning how to do this, or they change a little bit more gradually, but they do not stay the same. And I know that all of our wonderful vegan and plant-based documentaries are so valuable and so wonderful. And I just feel incredibly blessed to be part of this one. And I know that on the A Prayer for Compassion Facebook page, there are links to a lot of the screenings. And on my website, mainstreetvegan.net, if you click on A Prayer for Compassion, I am trying to keep up with all the screenings, although there are so many, I'm sure I've missed a few. But we have screenings coming up in many parts of the country and many parts of the world. So I know there's going to be one in Tallahassee, Florida, which is Thomas Jackson's hometown. So that's going to be cool. If you're in that part of the world, we're having one in Manhasset, Long Island, this Saturday at noontime, a vegan potluck brunch, and then the film, and I'll be there for a Q&A. We've got the London premiere happening May 23rd, and Thomas and I will both be there, and screenings in Dubai and Hong Kong and San Francisco and all over everywhere. So it's very exciting right now that we are in the kind of big screen cycle of the film. So you can't yet get it digitally, but if you would like to do a screening in your community, it's really, really easy. There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can contact us. You can just go to A Prayer for Compassion website and let Thomas know that you want to do a screening. And we are accepted now by Veg Fund, so people doing free public screenings don't have to pay any kind of licensing fee. You can just get the film and show it. And people who do want to show it in an actual theater can go through tugg.com and have a ticketed screening. And if enough tickets don't sell, then they just cancel the screening, so nobody's out any money or anything. So it's really easy. And then in the fall, of course, we will be digital. But it's really cool now to just see how many wonderful big screenings can happen. Because there's something about sitting there in the dark in a theater or a theater-like room where you're just completely focused. It's a place of transformation.
Well, it sure is. And thank you for being agreeable to Thomas's request to be the producer, because it really is a wonderful film. And he speaks a lot like you do about believing in miracles, and he, like you said, started on a shoestring and just believed. He just knew. He was guided very much to do this, and the results have been really wonderful. And exciting thing for us is that we, including you, Victoria, and Carol Saunders, are going to be in Kansas City in June at the Unity Convention, People's Convention, and Carol was able to convince the organizers to let us show that film at the Unity Convention. So this is hundreds of Unity ministers who are pre-vegan, who there's not a lot planned that night. And so we're hoping that they'll all come to the film. And so that will be wonderful. And then you have a Kansas City premiere planned also that same week, right?
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. There's always something about going back to your hometown to do something cool. So that's really special for me. But what Reverend Carol Saunders has done with Unity is utterly fascinating, because just because Unity was founded by vegetarians doesn't mean that it's not difficult to get this message across. So if somebody's listening thinking, yeah, but I'm Methodist. Well, the founder of Methodism, John Wesley, was vegetarian too. It's just that it's amazing how these messages get lost. General William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, there's just so much tradition there. But somehow, as we kind of got into the 20th century, mid 20th century, and on into the 21st, some of that got left behind. And yet it is starting to come back. And they were looking, as I understand it, at several films. This Tuesday night, June 18th screening there in Overland Park, Kansas, was called movie night, but they were looking at various films, and obviously films about spirituality, eclectic spirituality, metaphysics, the things that one thinks about when one thinks of unity theology, but by some kind of amazing, maybe we've used the word miracle too much, but it seems in that ballpark, they did choose a prayer for compassion. And it's so important because those of us who are already vegan understand that it's so powerful, and there's such a limit to what most of us can do to change the world. There's a finite amount of money that we can donate. There's a finite amount of time that we can volunteer. There's a finite amount of information that we can share. And yet to just be vegan, it changes so many things. It saves animals, it saves trees, it protects the climate, and it elevates us in a way so that I think we really kind of bring people kind of into this light. There's a beautiful line in the Bible, and if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. And I love that concept that, I don't know what's going to happen, but if I could just be lifted up, I'm going to have this magnetic pull that lifts other people up too. And that's what happens when somebody goes vegan. We get lighter, we feel better, we feel kinder, we feel more understanding. And just that kind of elevated goodness has this magnetic pull for other people and for what Dr. Ernest Wilson, wonderful Unity minister, who was one of my early teachers, he used to call it the upward progression of the universe. And I think right now, today, there is nothing more that we can do for the upward progression of the universe than to go vegan.
Wow, I love that phrase. That's really something. And so you're really demonstrating an answer to my next question, which is, how do you do what you do? Because you're so busy and you work so hard and nonstop. And I know it's not easy work because we are confronted with animal suffering at every turn. And so we talk about compassion fatigue and all that. But you, as you were talking, I was just going, okay, she doesn't seem to have compassion fatigue. And it's just like you're showing us this joy that we all want to show. We all want to demonstrate that because that will draw people to us and to veganism and the beauty of that. So tell us a little bit about how you do cope with all of the sadness and the bad news and things that people do to animals.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that I'm not in the trenches the way people are, the real heroes of this movement, the undercover people, those who are working hands-on with animals. My daughter has a little wildlife rehab, and just seeing what she's gone through. You work so hard with one little animal to try to save that life, but that life leaves the planet. And I think that's where the real compassion fatigue comes from, and those are the people for whom I have so much admiration. So I'm not doing that. So for me to even talk about this subject is kind of arrogant because I'm not there seeing it. I am met with it, obviously, the way we all are, seeing images online and just carrying around the knowledge. Part of it, I think, for me, is that I've been around it so long that it's kind of calloused. It's like I know what happens, and I'm devoting my life to changing it. But almost none of it's new. Every now and then I see some image or hear some story that's just like, oh, this is a new low for my fellow humans. But generally, I just put one foot in front of the other. And again, I'll tell you what I do, but again, I'm going to say I'm doing this very humbly because the truth is I don't have to face it like people who are really facing it, and I understand that. But because I do have a 12-step background, I am very imbued in the one day at a time philosophy, the living in day-tight compartments. And so I do what I can do today. And what I've been doing lately is kind of a little nightly inventory of what did I do today that really helped? Because for me, what causes me the most personal stress is there's been a revolution in the world, and we have this internet, and it's everybody is like an emergency room physician. I mean, we're on call constantly. I sometimes feel like I'm running down a mountain and I'm being pursued by an avalanche of emails and texts and messages on various social media platforms. And I just sometimes think I'll never get out. And the fatigue is just incredible that way. And so somebody's talking who isn't me. Thank you. It's a little bit difficult to keep the thoughts straight. So let's see. I actually had a point there. So, oh yeah. So for me, it's just bite off enough every day that I stay ahead of things. Because as long as I bring energy to this work, then I can face it every day. But if I get short on that energy, if I'm not meditating regularly, if I'm not exercising and doing yoga regularly, if I'm not drinking green juice, I know not everybody's into juice, but to me, without green juice, just lie down and forget the rest. But you have to care about yourself to make that green juice. And so when I'm not doing that kind of thing, I know that that's coming out of my ability to serve the animals and this cause. So a lot about self-care, and that does not come easily to me. All those years of dealing with weight and eating and all that kind of thing, I just didn't get solidified in self-care the way a lot of people do at an early age. So all of it's in there, just the focus, the keeping it in what can I do today, taking care of myself so that I can take care of others, and then keeping that log at the end of the day. What have I really done? Have I just answered a bunch of emails and just spun my wheels, or have I really done something that has made a difference for an animal, that has made a vegan or brought someone closer to being vegan, that's really in a definable, quantifiable way made a difference? And when that's my goal every day, then it's pretty cool. And again, I'm so lucky that my whole life is this work. And I know for a lot of people, they're still raising families, they're working jobs and all kinds of things. And so maybe their log for what have I done for animals needs to be weekly and not daily. We're all different and we're all at different places. But for me, if I go to bed at night and I haven't done something that has really moved the needle on veganism, then that's a day that I just should not have been given.
Wow. Okay, thanks. Those are lots of really good ideas that I think we can all use. And it is a major theme that we talk about on this show, because that's part of our spirituality, is keeping us going on this journey to creating a vegan world. So, Victoria, have you got any other things you'd like to add before we turn it over to our audience to ask questions.
Oh, wow. Well, I think we can just turn it over to them. I'm so happy that people are here. I'm so happy that this connection, that this vegan spirituality connection has become a thing. I mean, it was a thing in a lot of our minds for a very long time, but the fact that it's now a movement. And I guess one other thing I do want to say, Judy, people sometimes ask what the goal is for the film, for A Prayer for Compassion. And Thomas and I have talked about this as well. And of course, the first goal is, well, let's just make vegans, and that's really cool. But the other goal is to make animals and food an issue in religious discourse. Because anything that you can bring up to most religious people or people who are part of a religious or spiritual community, you bring up an issue. Well, where do you guys stand on abortion, gay marriage, women clergy, war, immigration, whatever it is? They're either wrestling with it and praying about it, or they've already come to some conclusion, and maybe we'll agree with their conclusion and maybe we won't, because different people of different religions come to different conclusions, but they've honored these issues by at least looking at them, by at least saying, okay, it's an issue. But if you say to them, well, what's your stand on animals? They'll probably say, I have a dog. Yeah, I mean, there is no stand. The idea that there needs to be one is just not something that most people in religious life have thought about. And what about food? And they'll say, oh, well, we have a soup kitchen. But the idea that food choices can have this ripple effect and affect other people in our community, other people around the world, and certainly other beings, is just something that is on the outside. And what we hope with A Prayer for Compassion, and what I certainly hope for my work, is that we can bring that into the discourse. Let's just look at what food is doing to human bodies. Let's look at what animal agriculture is doing to the planet. Let's look at Genesis 1:29. Did God change his mind on that? How many other times did he change his mind? I was just on YouTube the other day, and you know how when you're watching something and then something else comes on, you end up watching that. And it was this female evangelist. And I know anybody that knows that world would be very familiar with her. I can't come up with her name right now, but she was really cute. She has a southern accent. And the part that I tuned into, she was saying, now there's one thing I can tell you, honey, and that is that God does not change his mind. And I'm thinking, Genesis 1:29, God does not change his mind. So thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, can we open up for questions?
Sure.
Okay.
So if you've just joined us, or if you've been with us for a while, and if you're on the phone with us, you can ask a question by pressing *4, and that will unmute your microphone. And if you're with us on the webinar here, you can also just click one of the buttons that looks like the shape of a webcam, or it could be the shape of a microphone, and those icons will actually open up your camera and also your microphone. So we'd love to hear from you directly. Another way to join us is through your chat box. You can type into the chat box. Also, if you're with us on the online where you're joined us through a Facebook feed, you can type your question into the feed, and that would be another way to reach us. I just wanted to see if anybody has a question. I did notice that we had a question right off the bat, so I think I'll ask that, and this may be for you, Victoria. It says, thank you for the beautiful presentation. And the question is, I think it's called Tails Up, have vegan food for cats? This came up. There are several brands with carefully formulated complete nutrition for cats from Italy, the UK, and the US. And she would love to know of another one. She's come a long way, or we've come a long way since the 1970s, and were there no other vegan labels in the U.S. And so she also thanks you for your beautiful work. But sounds like she's got some kitties and wants to
Yeah.
know if you have any ideas.
Tails Up at this point is not even out with the dog food yet. They should be out in the fall. They do not have a cat food. I don't know if one is in the works. Um, and so I don't have that information. I just know that cats are more challenging to feed as vegans than dogs. We know about taurine, certainly, that cats absolutely need. I'm actually very excited about lab-grown meats for cats. I know that it's a little bit controversial in the vegan world. I don't want to eat any lab-grown meat. Thank you. It's just like, even if it's not harming any animals, I just have this aesthetic problem with it. But I think it's going to be just super cool as a base for cat food. So I know that we have all these things to look forward to.
Well, she actually says thank you, and we'll keep an eye out for the Tails Up in the future. And I think that's a really great point that you brought up about the created, I don't know what you call it, the green meats or however they call them, but that's a great resource for them, a wonderful use for the kitties, those kitties out there. So
Yeah, the kitties and people, there are people who say, I'm not eating any plant burger. And it's like, are you serious? I mean, because some of them are so meaty, they give me the creeps. But, there are a lot of people that if, they want meat and they want it to be meat. So I just say, cheers and congratulations to everybody who is trying to figure out ways to provide people with not only what they need, but also what they want so that we can end the suffering and start moving in the right direction.
Yeah, very true. So just curious if anyone else has questions, you're welcome to type them right into the chat box, anything you'd like to say, or you can join us. I know Elaine joined us earlier. You can share your webcam and ask us questions. We'd love to hear from you. And
could I ask Victoria a question?
Yes, please do. Please do. Please say your name.
Hi, this is Alyssa Beck, and Victoria, I heard you speak at the NAVS conference a number of years ago. Thank you for your work and your amazingness, and thank you for this kind of authentic kind of thing that you just did. It's really comforting to hear you speak. So I am actually just signed with a book company. We'll see how that goes, but I'm basing it on, thank you, on my master's thesis, which is on vegan spirituality and the range of veganism. And I'm just honoring what you're saying. It's so fascinating because when I did a survey of 44 people, I found that 26 of them were vegan, but the others who had answered the survey were mostly plant-based, but they also ate just a little bit of chicken or fish, mostly, or dairy, or sometimes meat. And so I didn't go to a vegan publisher because I thought, I have some information here that's not like pure vegan. I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but it's just fascinating to hear what you said about that subject. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is it makes me really nervous, this thing about the pretend meat. And the reason is that, or the meat that is meat that's made from cells, because I really believe that as humans we need to treat ourselves and the animals well. And it makes me nervous to have some sort of genetically created thing that we think that it's okay for people to eat. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there just for people to think about. It just gives me kind of a nervous, kind of visceral response to think that it's really okay to eat something that we're creating and think that it's okay. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. But thank you for your work, and I'm really looking forward to bringing your movie to Pittsburgh. Not myself.
Oh, great.
Through other people.
Well, that's wonderful. And, Jeffrey Cohan of Jewish Veg is right there in Pittsburgh. So
Okay,
you've
well,
got
he's awesome. Yes.
yeah, and so there's somebody wonderful, local, for a Q&A after. So yeah, that would be terrific. And what's your working title or your title for your book?
Oh boy, I have 3 different working titles, but
Oh,
it's the range of veganism is probably the closest to it, but it's just it comes from I worked with Gabriel Cousins, so I
uh-huh.
started out kind of intensely with as a raw living foodist about
Hmm.
4 or 5 years ago, and then I realized that there's a whole lot more to it than that. That's really a purist approach, and that's
Hmm.
not for everybody. Um, it may be the best to reach some sort of enlightenment, but not everybody can do that. So
Hmm.
just to let go. But then I realized that there's the junk food vegans who don't care about themselves. They just are about the animals and not realizing that if they don't take care of themselves, they're not going to be at their greatest offer. They're not going to have the best to offer, in my view, at least. And then there's the people that that are still eating flesh, you know. And I do sometimes tell people, dead flesh, why, that's dead flesh on your plate. I've like
Yeah.
crossed over into not caring sometimes I say that sometimes when people I'm perceiving that they're really insulting me too many times in a row.
Yeah.
I
Well,
kind of say that because, yeah.
it's so interesting where the power comes from and where the push comes from. And sometimes I think as we get a little older, we kind of get a pass on being able to be a little more in your face. So it's whatever works. And just, what I'll say as a counterpoint, if you would, on the lab grown meat, like I say, I don't want to eat it. And yet I feel that the environmental crisis is so severe. And if this number is true, if this 12 years to basically extinction is indeed what we're looking at, then I think we need to do everything, even things that if it weren't for that, we'd be saying, maybe not, maybe something else, maybe that's weird and creepy. I think to me, my work is all about making vegans. And yet there are a lot of people who don't want to be vegan. And even if we call it something else, call it plant-based, call it whatever you want, a lot of people, like you've talked about the people that you interviewed, they just want some, and some people just want lots. And so as long as they want that, if there's a way to give it, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe we'll find later that it causes people to grow 3 ears, but if we've saved the planet, then we've got the time to work on that problem. So I think that's where most of the people who are coming from, who are really into that and investing in that. And I love the story that Bruce Friedrich from Good Food Institute tells. He says that and I may get these years wrong and these numbers not quite right because I don't have a numeric brain, but basically in 1895 or so, there were something like 600,000 horses on the streets of New York City. So this problem was happening all over America and the rest of the world. So they had the very first gathering of city officials, mayors, and city council people. They came to New York. They were going to meet for 2 weeks and solve this horse problem because there was manure and there were carcasses. It was just a really big problem in cities. And they only met for 3 days and determined that the problem was so insurmountable that there was no possible way of solving it. And so everybody went home, just resigned to the fact we have this problem that we have to have all these horses. But 10 years later, there were only 6,000 horses on the streets of New York City because Henry Ford came along. And as Bruce tells the story so well, there certainly were people in animal welfare at that time who were speaking out for horses and doing so poignantly. And yet, because people felt that they needed, or they did need, I guess, at that time, horses to get from place to place, not much was happening. But along came this automobile, which of course has its problems. Just, I mean, obviously people die in car crashes. And so there are probably problems inherent in lab-grown meat as well. But it was better than having 600,000 horses, many of whom were mistreated and abused. So hopefully somehow as we progress, we can kind of do it with the torpedo principle. We might not go straight from where we are to perfection, but we kind of get off course and back on course and ultimately go in the right direction and solve the problems that we're facing now.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
And I hear
Thank
you. It's all so fascinating. So please let us know about your book when it comes out. That's so thrilling, and congratulations on getting a publisher and everything.
Thank you.
Hi, Victoria. This is Alain. Can you hear me? Or did you
Yes,
stop? Or
yes.
Hi.
Oh,
Yes,
hi,
please,
Victoria.
please.
I actually met you when I first became vegan 4 years ago. I was
Really?
in some session you did in New York City around this when you were around all this. I want to share that I am developing cell-based fish and cell-based fish, and in fact, since I became vegan, my daily prayer has been the fastest path to the permanent end of slavery of all sentient beings everywhere there is life, right? And I have had 100 miracles. There's no doubt that cell-based meat is happening through me, because the crazy things that have happened in the last 2 years to bring this together in a way that's not the way everyone else is doing it. This is a much bigger project, but unless we replace the meat at its source, and it's exactly the same meat, there's nothing different. Unless we replace it at the source, the carnivores are dug in. The cognitive dissonance is so bad. If we don't give them the same thing, it has to be everything. And I can just say that I know that God is love, and I know that love wants nothing more than the end of suffering of all unnecessary suffering and enslavement of all beings and consumption of beings from others. And I just know that this is part of the solution. So not to say that I don't want to see a world that doesn't have 200 years from now just plant-based, but the way to get there is no doubt it has to go through cell-based meat. And it's a very, very difficult challenge, but God is on our side.
Wow.
Somehow crazy stuff is happening. I mean, you wouldn't believe. It's like I tell people, I just can't believe the stuff that's happening, and it's the most difficult, almost impossible thing to do. So we need all the support we can get. It's almost impossible to fund this. It's like sending a man to the moon in an economy that's trying to do everything lean. Every business is lean. It's not the right way to do it. So we're taking a whole different approach, and thank goodness so far so good. So
Wow. So
yeah.
what made you decide on fish?
Well, I live right on the ocean, but I wanted to be I wanted to look at what hadn't been done, and meat was already taken. Memphis was around 2 years ago, and a year ago I looked at the people doing fish, and there were people doing salmon and tuna, and I thought, well, those are fatty fish. And I thought, well, what does a lean fish mean? I discovered that a lean fish actually doesn't have fat in its tissue, which means it's a much simpler tissue to develop, and everyone else missed it because they were focusing on market or high value species like salmon and tuna, and there's all these species, number one farm, number one captured tilapia and Alaskan pollock, that are in things you and I wouldn't eat. Fish, obviously we wouldn't eat it, but even most VCs wouldn't eat it. Fish sticks and fish things, but are so mass market and don't have a high level of, so it's just all, and the ocean, I have the ocean right behind me, and there's nothing between me and the trillion or billions of free beings out there, and they remind me every day that I'm saving them, and we have to save them as soon as possible, because their suffering is the worst. Their suffering is the farmed fish. It's a disaster. It's 5 fish for every chicken. It's awful. Anyway, so I'm on a mission, and God's on our side, but there are times it's like, whew, this is not and it's a mission that involves being mostly with non-vegans, because you can't build a technology company with vegans. So I'm in the world out there trying to push this forward. It's very hard, but thank goodness for you and others and the universe for supporting this.
So where are you? What state are you in?
Well, I'm in Florida, but the University of Washington and Seattle is where our hub is and we're building a partnership with the University of Washington. So I'll be moving there probably within a year.
Wonderful.
No,
that is really exciting.
Yes, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and I'm so grateful for all I'm so grateful for it. So thank you.
Well, and that's the excuse that so many people. Well, I'm almost vegetarian, but of course I eat some fish, and it's very interesting. There have been so many studies over the years about problems with pork, problems with beef, and to a lesser extent, but chicken as well. I mean, every time there's some kind of salmonella outbreak or something like that, we often think about chicken. But fish, this information that you have about the factory farmed fish is hideous. Most people,
Oh,
they just do not believe. They'll say, well, I don't eat that. I only eat
right.
wild fish, because they lie about, the wild fish. I mean, it's a
The world is getting
messy.
more, yes, there's
Hmm?
more and more self-lying going on, cognitive dissonance to justify the behavior, and it's getting worse in many ways. I mean, the truth is lost so much in this world, and so I think the only way is to do it that way. So yeah,
Oh, well,
thank you.
may you just have the wind at your back, or I guess I should
Thank
say
you.
something about sales. Uh,
Well, actually yeah, we use that metaphor too. Yeah, exactly. But we need more than 15 years though. This is going to take a long time. I hope we. But by the way, just in terms of timing, when I was in the 1970s, I thought for sure a terrorist would get a hold of a nuclear bomb, certainly in the next 50 years, and destroy us. How could that not happen with all the chaos in the world? It's never happened. I know someone's looking out for us at some higher level here, because I thought there was just no way possible for that not to happen. And here again we are, and we'll be around 30 or 40 years when we're finally done with animal agriculture.
wow,
Yeah,
that's so great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for this has
Oh, I
been
went
such an
overboard.
interesting conversation. We've got our spiritual version of how to uh, move through the plant-based meats and the non-plant-based meats. So it's all part of this picture of moving towards veganism as a spiritual practice. And we're so blessed to have everyone and all their voices on our program tonight. So I wanted to uh, take a moment. I know we've been talking a little bit about the all of these A Prayer for Compassion screenings that are going on, and mention one more that's happening that I'm actually helping to organize, which is the screening in Los Angeles. So for anyone who's local to LA, or if you want to fly in, June 3rd, we're going to be having a really wonderful and large premiere. We'll have Thomas Jackson, who is the film director, and he's in the film as well. He is going to visit with us, and he's going to answer questions as a Q&A. So there's just so many exciting things going on all different levels for veganism these days. And so I also wanted to take a moment and really thank Victoria from our hearts for joining us this evening and sharing your story with us, and really providing so much uplift, because your information about the veganism and what an impact it's having, and even in the spiritual communities, is really so inspiring. So thank you so much, Victoria.
My pleasure. And this is my total passion. I love veganism and making vegans and talking about vegans. And I love spirituality, really, and any brand. There's just something about how humans find meaning that it's just fascinated me my whole life. And then when you put them together, vegan spirituality, I could listen to you guys all night.
Oh, that's delightful. Really, it's great to be able to gather together in this forum here and talk with one another. And I'm so grateful to everyone for having the courage to do that. And also wanted to invite Victoria, if you have anything you'd like to close us out with, any kind of saying or anything, last word or two, or.
Well, my favorite quotation comes from Mahavira, the saint of Jainism, who said, "To every creature, his own life is very dear." And to me, that says everything. Sometimes people say, well, I'm not an animal lover. It doesn't matter. To every creature, his own life is very dear. Well, it's just a fill in the blank. It doesn't matter. To every creature, his own life is very dear. And we just see this, those of us who live with companion animals, that they have interests and needs and preferences. And I think if there could be an amazing minute when all humans were faced with the level of awareness, the level of sensitivity, the level of intelligence of other beings, this whole world would change. And I don't think it would take a minute. I think it would take 10 seconds.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That's so beautiful, and it's a wonderful gift that we can take with us as we leave this evening, and just remembering that to each animal, it's like their life is very dear. And I am so grateful to you for joining us. I know Judy's happy that you're able to join us this evening, and thanks to everyone who's participated. And we do these each month, so I hope that you'll tune in to our next Vegan Spirituality online gathering. And if you're near one of the areas where they're doing a Prayer for Compassion screening, please attend, because we want to support this film and really spread the vegan gospel throughout the world. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and for Victoria, many blessings on your good work. And we'll see everyone next time. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Good
thanks,
night,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Vegan.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks,
Oh,
Judy.
thank you.